From one degree or another, I think we would all admit that trials, afflictions, hardships are a part of life. You don't have to be alive very long to realize that there are some reoccurring ideas and concepts when it comes to living this life. And sometimes things are hard, things are challenging, things push us, they try us, right? What's unique about what we have been going through with this pandemic is that we're all facing this together. We're all facing it basically at the same time. Maybe it's affecting some of us a little different than others, but the reality is, regardless, it's something that has challenged us, and it's something that has affected all of us. In fact, it might affect some people to the point to where other trials have surfaced as a result of the pandemic, right? I mean, that's the nature of trials, of afflictions. When something comes your way, it has the tendency of causing those things that just float right below the surface to surface. And now you have to also deal with those things as well. And this pandemic has affected different people in different ways and caused them to react in ways that have been, well, quite frankly, toxic and not good for them, for their families, etc. I think we can look around and we can see how this is affecting our communities, it's affecting our world. And some of it has been really bad. Some of it has been good, that is, people have taken advantage of things in such a positive way. But the reality is, it's a challenging time, regardless of how you see it, regardless of how it's affecting you. And so today, what I want to do is share something with you that I think we all need to keep in mind. We all need to keep it on the forefront of our minds, especially considering these times. It's something that is relevant all the time, but especially right now, I want to remind you of something. It's a statement that's found in Romans chapter 12 and verse 12. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about the broader context of this, and in fact, I don't think we have to, because this particular verse is a part of a stream of verses that are really like a rapid-fire statements that Paul just starts throwing out. He doesn't explain, he doesn't elaborate very much at all, if at all. And so there's just things that he throws out there, and you're kind of left thinking that, okay, this is something I'm supposed to do. This is something that he's saying that we should do, or how things should be. And so there's not really a whole lot to explain, but it is something to contemplate, something to think upon, especially in light of your current situation, okay? So I think this verse is particularly applicable to us right now. And so what I want to do is basically like a little, you might call it a word study, okay? And before you roll your eyes and wish that you to come here this morning, just hang tight. Romans chapter 12, verse 12, Paul says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer." And then that's it. That's what he says. So we can go home. That's it. There's no further elaboration on this stuff, right? But while there isn't any elaboration on these, I will tell you that these particular things, hope and endurance and prayer, continue to pop up throughout this letter that Paul writes to the Romans. And so while it's not necessarily the theme of Romans, it does tell you that there's some underlining stream that Paul continues to tap into to help them with whatever it is that he's trying to help them with, okay? It's the bigger picture. And so when you see things that are being repetitive, you should pay attention. And I think that, again, this particular sentence is particularly applicable to us right now. So, for our time, let's break down this verse with just a few observations, very briefly. Here we go. Paul starts off by saying, "Be joyful in hope." Your translation might say, "rejoicing in hope." Actually, the verse could be translated as, "Be joyful because of hope." What's interesting about this is the term joyful literally means to be glad, to be well off, and wait for it, to thrive. Now, when you think of the term joyful, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What does it mean to be joyful? You automatically think happy, right? Actually, there's a difference, because happiness oftentimes is dictated or contingent upon what? Yes, your external circumstances, right? But joy is different because joy is not based on external circumstances. At least it doesn't have to be. In fact, Paul is going to argue here, I believe, that joy, and I think the New Testament argues this as well, that joy is, while it might include the concept or the feeling or the emotion that we call happiness, joy is actually not contingent upon external circumstances. Joy is contingent upon internal circumstances, okay? So joyful, think about it this way. When you see the word joyful, you're talking about the ability to thrive. Now he says, joyful in what? He says, be joyful in hope. The word hope here is not the word wish. It's not the idea that I hope this or that happens, like, I don't know if it's going to rain or not. I hope it does, or I hope it doesn't. I hope it doesn't get too hot. I hope it doesn't get too cold. I hope my truck starts. I hope it doesn't, so I don't have to go this place, right? I hope my kids, listen, I hope my kids go to sleep when you put them to bed, right? I hope they don't get up 1,000,001 times. Okay. So, right, those are like circumstances that you oftentimes when you say them, you're actually doubting that they're going to happen, right? But the hope in Scripture, specifically this hope, has to do with trust and expectation. Literally, the word means confidence, expectations, okay? The idea of anticipations. And so, confidence, anticipation, expectation. And this is wrapped around the idea of trust. Trust. When you actually trust someone or something, you anticipate some things. You expect some things, right? And so you say, you have hope. Paul says, find your joy, find your thriving. You can thrive because of your hope. Now, the question is, hope in what? And isn't that the $1,000,000 question? Where is your hope? Paul says you can thrive because of your hope. So if you're not thriving, and regardless of the situation, you may need to stop and ask yourself, where is my hope? Where does my hope come from? And I suggest to you, based on the text, obviously Paul's talking about the hope that we all have as Christians. But here's the thing. When we talk about hope that we have as Christians, we're oftentimes immediately going to the very end. Once you die, what happens after that? I'm suggesting to you, when Paul talks about the hope and when the Bible talks about hope, it's not just the idea of what happens when you die. It has to do with what happens as you live, because you can thrive because of your hope. And the hope is the hope that we have in God, the promises that He has given us. The hope could be something as simple as, I believe, I trust, I expect, I anticipate that God is working through this situation to help me. Somehow or another, things are going to work in my favor. Things are going to work out for the best for me, even though I don't understand it or may never understand it. It's the idea that I have confidence that God is with me, that He walks with me, that He is guiding me, that He's blessing me, that He's giving me exactly what I need. It's the confidence that one has to entrust. Remember, that's the word, John 6, for believe. You entrust certain things. You entrust your life into the care of another. That's the idea. And Paul says, as a result of this hope, no matter the circumstance, you can thrive in the good and in the bad. Your thriving, in other words, is not contingent upon your circumstances. It's contingent upon what? It's contingent upon your hope. So the question is, where does your hope lie? What is your hope? Now, just because we say this, it doesn't mean, right, that all things are going to go your way, that things are going to be easy, right? It doesn't mean that things are always going to go well. Does it? It doesn't mean any of that. And that's why Paul says, not only are you be joyful because of your hope, you can thrive because of your hope. He says to be patient in affliction. This is where it gets good, okay? For you word nerds, here we go. The word patient here, when you think of the word patient, what do you think about? What comes to your mind of someone being patient, right? Biting their tongue maybe, or just allowing the circumstance to be what it is, and that is all true. In fact, the word patient here is one of the words in this text that I really love. It literally means, now picture this, use your imagination, to remain behind. It means to remain behind, to hold out, to stand your ground. Stubbornness maybe is a good word. I didn't think about this morning. See, this service is going to be better than the first service now. The idea of being stubborn is usually not, but that's the concept. Like, no, I'm going to hold out here. I'm going to hold out. I'm going to stand behind. But it also carries with it the idea of not just standing your ground, but enduring it and doing it calmly. That's the idea of patience. Well, literally the Greek word that's translated patience in our text. The idea of standing or remaining behind. Now, when you think about somebody remaining behind, this is the analogy I like to use. A building is on fire. Most of the people do what? Run. I'm getting out of this, okay? When a trial comes your way, when a hardship happens, we almost seem to be hardwired to do what? Run away. We want to avoid it. We do not suffer well. We just don't. That's just the reality. Because we're hardwired to flee. Fight or flight kicks in. And most of the time we're fleeing. We're not standing behind and fighting, okay? Being patient here is to stand behind and fight. A building is on fire. Most people are leaving except for who? Yeah, they're running towards it, right? Emergency, they're running towards it. Or maybe there are people behind in the building who are standing behind, remaining behind to help others escape, right? To help others get out. Look, you patiently endure this thing. I should have had Chris up here to tell you about this. When you're going through as a fireman, right? As a person who has to go inside these potentially intense situations, you don't have the option to run or flee. You have to try and remain calm, right? Because in those decisions, in those split-second moments, you have to be able to have your wits about you in order to endure whatever comes your way. Paul says, listen, that's life. That's life. You can thrive no matter what, now, right now, because of your hope. And so I would add, therefore, be patient, calmly endure affliction. The word affliction here is another interesting word. It is the word in the Greek that means pressing together, pressure. We're talking about the thing that you experience, the thing that you feel when you're stressed. We're talking about the thing that you feel when things aren't working out the best. You're talking about the thing you feel as a parent. You're talking about the thing you feel if your marriage isn't all working out. You're talking about the thing you feel when your job isn't the best. So you talk about the thing you feel when you have so much on your plate that you can't juggle it anymore. We're talking about the thing you feel when things don't go your way and you cannot handle it. You know that feeling of that pressure that comes in, which, by the way, when it's released, right, what happens? We react in ways that either make it better or make it worse, increase the pressure. Paul says that when the pressures of life are just coming down upon you, you can endure them. You just have to be patient. You can calmly endure those things that take place. Ironically, he's talking about endurance, and ironically, endurance is one of those things that leads to things like more hope. It leads to character. Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 5, verses 3 through 5, where he says suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. Now, here's the problem that I have with this verse and many verses like it, because we go to these things and we think they work linearly. We think one thing is going to automatically lead to the next and leads to the next, leads to the next. And while that does happen, you have to think beyond linear. It's all over the place. While one thing happens, another thing is happening. It's creating another thing. Character is being built at the same time your hope is being increased. Okay? Your endurance is flourishing and you're being able to thrive because of your hope. Your hope is increased because you calmly endure the things that are happening. See, it all happens simultaneously at the same time. And while emphasis might be on one at one moment, the emphasis might change to one in the next. But it's safe to say that the idea of endurance is not only just simply an aspect of what it means to be a disciple because, well, life is filled with afflictions, trials, right? It is a part of developing and building the character. The endurance is a part of helping us develop the character, which Paul says is a part of us increasing hope. And the more hope you have, the more you're able to do what? Run from the more you're able to stay behind and thrive in the most unlikely circumstances. So Paul says, listen, you can thrive because of your hope. So be patient. Be patient. Stand behind. Endure the pressures. Well, that sounds great, doesn't it? But he doesn't tell you how. He doesn't give you a list of instructions now. This is where the text falls apart for us, right? Like, okay, so that sounds great. How do you do that? How does this become a possibility? What I'm going to suggest to you, there are lots of different ways by which we get to this point where, yeah, no matter what happens, it can be tough. It doesn't mean we don't get frustrated. It doesn't mean that things don't affect us or bother us. But ultimately, in the end, we end up thriving in these situations because of our hope. How do we get to that place, though? Isn't that the question? Well, I think Paul left us a little hint, and I think it's in the next phrase, okay? He says this, you be devoted to prayer. Here we go. This is even better. He says, you be devoted to prayer. Now, when I say that, what are you thinking? What comes to your mind? What does prayer look like? Okay? He says, you be devoted to prayer. And devoted is actually, it's the English word that's translated from a Greek word, which simply means to be busy with. He says, to be devoted to prayer, to busy yourself with, to attend to constantly, literally in the Greek. To busy yourself with and to attend to constantly. Which reminds me of something that Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, where he says, pray without ceasing. Literally, pray without interruption. Who does that? Who could do that? Who does that? So there has to be another meaning to this, right? Like there has to be an explanation. We have to be able to explain this away so that we're more comfortably able to just kind of walk through things and do things the way we want to, right? No, that's what it means. Pray without ceasing. And it's what Paul says in Romans 12 when he says, be devoted to prayer. Busy yourself with prayer. Be constantly attended to prayer. Now think about this. Of all the things we can busy ourselves with, Paul says, busy yourself with what? Prayer. But there's this ministry over here, there's this thing over here, and there's just this, and there's this. Paul says, no, busy yourself with prayer. Wait a minute. So you're telling me that I have to spend all of my time simply making requests to God about what I need. I have to spend all my time asking God to do something because I can't do it. I have to spend all my time bringing my demands before God. So, because isn't that prayer? That's what prayer is, right? Right? Isn't that what prayer is? You see, that's a part of what prayer is, but it's a limited view of prayer. Yes, a part of prayer is making your requests known, right? But that's a part of it. And in fact, that aspect of it is nothing more than a discipline that reminds you of the one whom you go to. the one you trust. So, how should we look at prayer? How is this a possibility? Well, I want to suggest to you this morning that it might be helpful to see prayer as a constant awareness of God's presence in your life. Now, that sounds like it's tweetable. You can come up with a graphic, a meme. You can stick that on Instagram. You can make a little post, there's a little pithy saying, but that's about it, right? How do we take that and make it a reality for ourselves? If prayer is an awareness of God's presence in your life, how do we bring that here? Well, remember what Jesus said? Go into your closet and pray. What do you mean by go into your closet and pray? Because there was a time when nobody had closets. In fact, you didn't have a closet because you get taxed for the closet and the windows. So you didn't have. So what does that mean to go into your closet? So, right, if I was a kid and I was a smart aleck like I am, I'd have said, Mom, I can't pray because I ain't got a closet. Jesus said, go in your closet, so I can't pray. So there you go. What you going to do? The reality is when Jesus says, go in your closet and pray, he's saying, don't do it like this, out in the open, but it had more to do with being out in the open. It had to do with the mannerism, the heart. He says it's not about outward expression. Go inward. And so I suggest to you that the closet has to do with everything that has to do with internally. Okay, internally. So we're talking about perspective. We're talking about the way, the condition of the heart. Okay? And so praying is a discipline. Praying in your closet. It helps to bring you to this place where there is a constant awareness of God's presence. And so going to your closet, is one way by which you become more and more aware of this reality of in Him we live and move and have our very existence. I get that this concept of being constantly aware of God's presence might be a new one to you. But the reality is, it's an ancient concept. And it supersedes any of our ideas or concepts that we have developed when it comes to prayer. See, all the different modes and ways in which we can pray, all those things are disciplines. They help mold and shape us and bring us into this place where we can become more and more aware of God's presence. And so look at prayer as something beyond just asking God when He already knows what you're going to ask anyway. Does that make any sense? Why do I have to constantly go to God and ask Him stuff He already knows? Yeah, because it's for you. And it takes you to this place. Is it beginning to make sense? See, the reality is, in order for us to see it this way, in order for this to become a reality for us, it's going to take a change of mind, a transformation of mind. And it just so happens that this verse is right in the middle of Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, where Paul begins by saying, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so it goes without saying that the things that he mentions thereafter has to do with the results of minds that have been transformed. It is a different way of thinking about God and living in His presence. In fact, I recently created a video called Unstimulated, released it last week. I actually talked a little bit more about this. You might want to go and watch it, or you can just bypass it and we can have a conversation. Nevertheless, it is extremely important, I believe, that we come to see this, that prayer is that constant awareness of God's presence, because this is why. Our ability to thrive, no matter the circumstance, and to calmly endure afflictions is contingent upon the degree to which we give attention to the presence of God in our lives. That's something we can't escape. How am I able to thrive in these situations? Because of my hope. And it's because of my hope that I have endurance. I can calmly endure this. How do I get to that place? Because I am aware of the ones in whose arms I rest, in whose hands my life is guided, because I'm aware of God's presence. By the way, which is where my hope comes from. We're not just talking linear. All integrated in a very unified way, a oneness. Now, it might be helpful to think about it this way. When you think about being aware of God's presence and the benefits that come with that, I'll use this example before we close here. I think about being in the same room, or even in the same house with my wife. We're not talking. We're talking, but things are good. Okay, in that moment, we're not talking. She's reading her book and I'm doing my thing. Right? We're not even looking at each other. She's in her own little world. I'm in mine. But I'm aware of her presence. And my awareness of her presence brings me comfort. It brings me a sense of peace. Things are right in the world. There is a sense of connection. There is an experience. And you know that there's an experience because as soon as she leaves, I don't have that anymore. The whole experience is completely different. But it's an opportunity whenever I'm aware of that attention, I'm aware of that presence, lots of things can happen. I can talk. I can listen. I can just be. And I can experience something that, surpasses understanding. And that's the same thing that we can experience as well as we give attention to the presence of God in our lives. Our hope increases. Our endurance prevails. So we're able to thrive no matter what's going on. Doesn't mean that it won't be hard and that we won't struggle, but ultimately you come out on top, right? You don't just live. You don't just float through life. You don't just survive, right? You thrive. And we're talking about the here and now. So I challenge you to take upon Paul's rapid fire statements here, right? Rejoice or be joyful in or because of your hope, right? Be patient. Hold up. Calmly endure the pressures, the affliction. Busy yourself with becoming attuned to and giving attention to the reality of the presence of God in every moment.